Put God number one. Let's put religion number two. Love, I don't know. We got to put that number three, I guess, right? And then it's tariff. Because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back that left us.
According to this, quote, retailers are warning that U.S. consumers could once again be faced with empty store shelves and the kind of supply chain snarls that marked the COVID era if Donald Trump's tariffs on China remain at their current levels.
America's CEOs are sounding the alarm, warning that the U.S. economy could soon take a big hit after President Trump's sweeping tariff announcement sent markets spinning.
Rick, Liberation Day was just a few weeks ago, earlier this month. How have things felt with you and your business since you learned how high these tariffs were going to be?
I'm rapidly being liberated from my money.
Where did those numbers come from? Something, again, so stupid you can't believe that any country would do this. But the idea is the following. Okay, is it completely delusional or rhetoric? It's delusional, okay? Just so you know. It's weird. But anyway, and then they made some absolutely stupid formula that you would not accept in a first year, third week class. It came out of the U.S. Trade Representative's office. They probably were told, do it overnight, the boss wants it.
Continually do production in China, and we have products that are ready to ship here now. They were supposed to ship last week. However, once the tariffs were announced and we realized that instead of paying $30,000, we were going to have to pay $230,000, we don't have that kind of money.
So some 97% of the nearly $400 million worth of baby strollers that the U.S. imported last year came from China. For car seats, that number was 87%, according to Import Genius.
China, for example, now speaking out about U.S. tariffs, denying that it is engaged in ongoing talks with the White House. For the latest, let's get to Eunice Yoon in Beijing. Hey, Eunice.
Hey, Carl, well, that's exactly right. China today denied the claims by President Trump that his team is in talks with the Chinese on the tariffs. In fact, the Commerce Ministry said today, at present, there are absolutely no negotiations on the economy and trade between China and the U.S. Chickening out has been trending with 250 million views. State TV has also been using one of the memes that has bursted onto the scene here when mocking President Trump officially, calling him the 10,000 tariff grandpa and saying that his constituents have been suffering because of some of his actions. The other memes that are going around, King Know-It-All and Trump the nation builder, but that nation is China.
Well, everybody, what an intro to the ongoing tariff war between the United States and China. And I want to welcome you all to today's live stream. My name, of course, is Cyrus Jansen. Thank you for being here. We've got an amazing show planned for you today because we have some special guests, Alex from Reporterfy Media, and also Carl Zah, who's going to join us today to discuss the latest in this amazing development. And to get us going, I'm going to go ahead and bring Alex from Reporterfy Media into the studio. Alex, how are you today?
Yeah, great. Looking forward to the Power Hour with you, Cyrus, and of course, Mr. Zah.
Absolutely. Well, we always got a lot to discuss, Alex, and I think this is a very interesting topic, and I want to welcome everybody into the chat because, Alex, there's something that is going on very interesting in Western media and around the world, because I think you have kind of two camps right now, right? You have one camp that is, very, very pro-Trump and is basically trying to spin everything that he is doing that, wow, the tariffs are actually working. This is making America great. And then you have probably the reality, which is, when you start going around the world, you start seeing how other countries around the world are perceiving the United States. You see how other countries are, striking deals with China. But Alex, I want to kind of go in a different direction to start this live stream because, I've seen I'm trying to check all my media sources. And what's very interesting is I see this narrative that, China is collapsing because of the tariffs. And, as I'm mentioning this up, I'm going to go ahead and bring Carl into the studio. Carl, how are you, my friend?
Hey guys, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're giving the people what they want this morning and this evening, wherever you guys are tuning in from. We've got Alex and Carl. Always enjoy when we get to talk, China, tariffs, United States, U.S.-China relations with you too. And Carl, I was just telling Alex, there's an interesting storyline that's going on here, and I wanted to bring you guys in specifically to talk about this because I've seen some YouTube videos, from some accounts that are saying, wow, China's collapsing as a result of the tariffs. There's revolutions in the street. People are protesting at factories. People are burning down factories since they don't have any more work. The entire Chinese economy is going to collapse as a result of these tariffs. But, Alex, I know you were just recently at the Canton Fair in Guangzhou. Carl, I know you just did a 2-week trip, through China. I know you spent some time in Beijing. I'm not sure your other cities, but it's kind of interesting. I'd like to discuss this a little bit. So
Beijing and Shanghai.
Beijing and Shanghai. Perfect. Okay, great. So two big powerhouse cities there. Carl, why don't you open us up? Tell us a little bit about your trip, kind of what you saw on the ground. I know you were sharing your journey a lot on Twitter. What is your recent takeaway, from your recent visit to Shanghai and Beijing?
Well, I was I was very eager to find out what the mood on the street is, and I had an interesting talk with a taxi driver in Beijing. I did my Thomas Friedman taxi driver
Yeah,
interviews. So according to him, there was a hard time in China. There was a post-COVID hangover,
right,
and there was a burst of real estate bubble. So that was what he considered a hard time. Like he was not worried about the tariff. Like that was not even on his radar. And when I went to Shanghai, um, you know, I noticed people are just going through their ordinary lives. When I went to Shanghai, I was at the Boon, which is very touristy area, right? Obviously,
yeah,
there's probably no locals that goes to the Boon, right? It's 100% tourist, but the place was jam packed.
yeah,
I was there for 3 days, and on Friday, in the evening time, the military police start rolling out because they have to guide the crowd. The crowd was so large, they have to guide the crowd to make sure there's no crowd crushing happening like that happened in the Halloween in South Korea, for example.
right, right,
But the place was packed, full of domestic tourists, and everyone was just out to enjoy a good time. I mean, none of the people I talked to, even think about tariffs because people don't understand. China, 19% of China's economy is based on export. And out of that
right,
19%, 15% is export to United States. So if you do the math, actually only 3% of Chinese GDP is directly tied to export to US. So which means a huge chunk of Chinese economy, like the people that work in there won't even notice when the tariff war goes off. The people who directly do business with US will get it, and no doubt about that. They will take some
right.
pain, but vast majority of people, for them, this really nothing burger, compared to what they have already gone through, which is a post-COVID hangover and the real estate bubble. So, from my observation, China's economy is actually on the rebound.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you brought up a good point there, Carl. Is that there's a very big perception that China, like that their entire economy is based on exports and manufacturing, and there's no doubt that China is extremely good. I mean, they're the global manufacturer in many ways, but it is very interesting when you start looking at the data as far as the exports as the percentage of GDP. Actually, I have a graph. I'm going to try to find that to bring that up, but it actually peaked around 2005. So 2005, it was around 36%, which is quite a lot, more than a third, obviously. But it's been steadily decreasing, like you said. And so, like you said, going down from 36, reducing down to 19. So there's actually other countries in the world that are much more dependent on their exports rather than China. And I think that what that shows as well is that over the past 20 years, China's government has been able to shift a lot of that GDP to internal consumption and more of a domestic activity. Obviously, we know real estate, for example, is a very large component of China's GDP. So that's a very good insight, and I think something that people really miss. So, Carl, you feel that China's a little bit more of an economic recovery right now. I want to turn it over to Alex. Share with us a little bit about the Canton Fair, Alex, because you did some great videos there. I know you met up with. There's been quite a lot of YouTubers actually on the ground in China that have gone and recently made some videos about the Canton Fair. For those of you not familiar, I mean, this is the world's largest trade show. It happens every April and October, if I'm not mistaken, in Guangzhou. I believe it's around 70 years old as well. It's been going on for many decades, and it really is. Well, tell us a little bit more about that, Alex, because I know you're really the expert on that, having attended so many times. So tell us, your experiences and kind of what you're seeing at the Canton Fair, as I'm sure tariffs were a big part of the discussion.
Yeah, the Canton Fair is, if you want to compare it to something, it's kind of like 10 times the size of the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Now, the amount of people that show up for this, the amount of vendors that are there are anywhere from 65,000 to 72,000 vendors. Huge, massive show. In fact, this year broke records: record crowd day 1, record crowd day 2, and record crowd day 3. So business, people want to do business for sure. But there was a few things that were notable. Of course, these are a lot of Chinese companies, and they do welcome international sellers, but pretty much the only American companies there were KFC and McDonald's. From a hardware perspective or even software, it was a no-show, and I think that pretty much speaks volumes. Now, if we want to dissect the Canton Fair and see, were tariffs part of a problem, I would have to say yes, there is going to be some impact. But you see how we're talking about China's economy. If you go back 10 years, if you were the big three from the East Coast of the United States, General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, it's a fish in the barrel. You would sell a car pretty much to anyone in China.
Right.
Those days are over. It's gone. And now the Chinese aren't really concerned about these big ticket items. And this is where we're going to see quite a shift here, where the Chinese will say, what, we can do without the Starbucks. We can do without, McDonald's. We can do without, a couple of things here, even Teslas. So I think if this was to happen 10 years ago, it would have been very, very interesting here and impactful to the average Chinese consumer. But pretty much everybody just says, what have I got in my house that's made in America? And pretty much all they're doing is picking up a bag of McDonald's. That's about it.
Yeah, that's funny. I did see a viral TikTok with a Chinese guy, saying he's like, has his hands out, and it's like, this is what I have that's made in America in my apartment. Now go to your apartment and see what you have that's made in China. It's a very interesting one. And, Alex, I just want to kind of piggyback on your comment there when you're talking about, the shift that we've seen in China. I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand. I first went to China in 2007, and I remember at that time, this was quite interesting, is that, let's just remove Carl here. He'll be back in a second. But in 2007, Chinese people, it was very interesting because they were very, very excited to buy anything more American. For example, there wasn't this initiative to buy Chinese. I'm going to go specifically to the auto industry. I remember like Buick. Buick used to make, Buick minivans were very popular. People would, it was a thing of like, you wanted to go in, you would pay cash for this Buick minivan. It was more of like a status symbol. Like, wow, look at this. I've got this big American car, and, Buick and, GM and, obviously the German automakers, Mercedes, BMW, Audi. All of them were just making so much money, during that time. It was just really incredible how successful they were. And it was almost, China was the goose that laid the golden egg. It was by far their number one market, their most profitable market. I remember very specifically, Mercedes-Benz was one of our big clients back in the day when I was working in Shanghai. And, we would talk with the managers there, and they said, we have such an easy job, Cyrus, we're moving 400 or 500 cars a month. We don't really need to do any marketing. Everybody wants one. It's a status symbol. And yeah, we just kind of show up to work and just sell cars. It's a very low pressure job because the demand is so high. And now you have, I think there's a really good insider. I think his name is Tu Le, Chinese name. He has like China, or I think it's Sino Auto Insights is his a great handle. Basically, just tweets and has a website that deals specifically all about Chinese EVs. And he said, within 5 years, all of these Western car makers are going to be gone. Like they're not going to even have a presence. So within 20 years, you're going to see a shift from everybody wanting to buy a Mercedes and everyone wanting to buy an Audi to now, okay, it's not really like we don't want to buy it. It's just the Chinese version is so much better. And I think that's what, I think, Alex, what was really interesting is, do you remember the speech from JD Vance, I don't know, maybe a month ago now, where, he talked about, globalization has been a failure. He said the richer countries, we were supposed to get richer while the poorer countries stayed manufacturing, but that didn't happen, did it? The poorer countries, they started moving up the value chain, and they, instead of manufacturing, they started designing, they started innovating, and we didn't expect that. And so it's just a very interesting comment from, the vice president, who says it's like, so that means globalization has failed, just because China is now inventing and not just be remaining a cheap manufacturer. I thought that was, such an interesting comment there.
Following up from the Canton Fair, I then proceeded to Shanghai to the auto show, which I think wrapped up today.
Okay.
I'm going to be clear here. The big three are in serious trouble here.
Yeah.
And they need to either reinvent themselves quickly. We've seen a country completely take over the new energy vehicle market. If the average person out there hasn't been in one of these cars, it doesn't cost money to go for a test drive. Trust me, go for a test drive. BYD, come into a showroom near you. Nothing you can do about it. It's on its way. Doesn't matter how many tariffs are in front. It's on its way. The big three, big trouble, big problems ahead from them. I don't know how they're going to get through this, especially in China. When you're a young person getting into a car in China, you want the following. You're going to sit into a luxurious new energy vehicle.
Yep.
Companies like CATL, they are the battery kings here of China, or BYD. Those two companies dominate the world. CATL quite heavily. They came up with a sodium-ion battery that was just released. They've combated the charging anxiety issue. That's gone. They've combated the reliability on lithium ion and replaced it with pretty much sodium ion from your kitchen table to your car now. Right. And these batteries are rapidly being charged, and they've captured also the minus 40 degrees issue. So if we're looking at the car market, it's over. And you know what shocked me here, Cyrus? There's 1 million people. 1 million people go to the Shanghai Auto Show.
Yeah.
Okay. Tesla was a no-show.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
And and unless they have a small booth hidden on some floor that I didn't go on, I didn't see them anywhere. And you see, here's the thing, is these new buyers here from China, they expect a lot in a car now. They don't care about air conditioning and a CD player. Right. They want zero gravity seats. They wanted heated massage seats. They want LiDAR, third generation autonomous driving. They want to be able to see 500 meters in fog. And they want about 20 cameras, onboard entertainment, connectivity at 5G. That's what the big three are up against. Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Alex, I did find this. I'm going to bring this up. So this is the,
Sure.
Just a great graph here that we can all observe. So this is what we were referencing earlier. We've seen this actual, again, this is something that you would never hear in Western media. This is a point that many people overlook. But again, you look at that 2005 number peaking at 36%. So this is really just showing, again, the exports as a percentage of GDP. So, this is the shift that we've seen in China, where again, this is right around the time where I first went to China, where it was super reliant on its exports. But then, that's the change that has happened is, creating that domestic need for products. And again, it's because of innovation. I think that's where, it's really funny, Alex, I saw an amazing tweet yesterday from one of our favorite senators, Senator Tom Cotton. Not sure if you saw it, but he said, today is World IP Day. Remember, China doesn't innovate; it only steals. From semiconductors to biotech, they're looting America's ideas to build their military. I'm going to keep fighting to stop it. And what's really interesting with this, Alex, I'll kind of bring this point up, is I kind of had an epiphany about this. I actually think that this anti-China propaganda actually hurts the United States a lot more than it does China. And I want to, expand upon that a little bit and get your thoughts as well, because, what's interesting is, you have our U.S. politicians who, routinely tell Americans, China doesn't innovate. All they do is steal. Right? That's they basically are so reliant on America, and it doesn't really affect China because when you're on the ground in China like you are, Alex, you're living the real dream. I mean, you're living the real life, right? I mean, you are in China, you're seeing it with your own eyes. I mean, Chinese people, that this is real life for them, right? I'm in China, I get to see the technology, I see the advancement, I see the innovation. So it's almost like Chinese people are like, okay, I don't really care, right? You can say whatever you want about China. You're not here, you don't live it. We're here every day on the ground. We are living in, pick it like a city like Chongqing or Shanghai, Beijing, I mean, Shenzhen, any of these big cities, but even the second, third tier cities, I think that's where I really want people to focus on is, how advanced they are with their metros and how clean they are and just how much more advanced. I mean, they're more advanced than any city in the United States. So you kind of have this situation where, U.S. politicians are just kind of lying to themselves to make them feel better. But then what happens, Alex, is it kind of backfires because all of a sudden China makes something like DeepSeek, which completely changes the future of an industry, right? The entire AI market has changed because of DeepSeek. And they essentially made, you have OpenAI that's saying, okay, we're spending, hundreds of billions of dollars building this super advanced thing. No one in the world can do it. That's why it's so expensive. And then China comes along and says, yeah, we kind of built this for like $5 million. No, we didn't really spend a lot of money on this, but basically our platform is the same, if not better. And so this is where Americans get cheated because it's like, wait, how did China make this? Like, how is this possible? I thought they're collapsing. I thought that they don't innovate. I thought that China's behind the U.S. So it kind of actually backfires on America in many ways because it serves as this distraction. And then a lot of people, gosh, they're just completely blindsided when China inevitably leapfrogs. And that's what we've seen. I mean, we actually see China leapfrogging the West in many industries, right? Like simple fact is there's not a country in the world that can actually produce an electric vehicle battery except China, right? Only country in the world that can actually make it. So it's interesting when we say, not when we say, but when U.S. politicians go on these tangents and say China doesn't innovate, they can only steal.
Just hearing what you've said to me is quite astonishing because in the last week, I visited two major locations. One is CATL's battery manufacturing and BYD. For those that are not aware, BYD started as a battery company.
Right.
And it has batteries for all types of vehicles, whether they're construction vehicles, you name it. That company alone has 1 million employees. Okay.
Right.
So I decided to get in the car out that window there, drive an hour and 30 minutes to their battery plant that they have in Chongqing here.
Yeah.
I asked a question. How many people in R&D? They said 107,000 employees work in their research and development at the one company.
Wow.
107,000. Don't believe me? Go Wikipedia right now. 965,000 employees, over 107,000 in R&D. Okay. CATL. The word China doesn't innovate, it steals. CATL is, the battery boys. They're the guys they're the kings of batteries. Okay. Even Tesla has them in their car.
Oh yeah.
These guys have one of the largest patent portfolios going out this year in 2025 and 2026, giving Huawei a run for its money. You see, we don't hear Americans suing Americans, but a lot of Americans sue Americans in American courts for patent infringements or IP theft. It goes on through all the courts. So this isn't just a China, China's taking everything from us and look, they're stealing. Really? Are they? Oh, okay. Well, where did they get their battery technology from? And I could go on and on and on with you on other sectors, but I think these two, CATL and BYD, that says it right there. End of argument.
No, it's very true, and I think that's where, I think this is why the propaganda in this unfortunate message from a lot of people, this idea that China's going to collapse, and it actually it's really backfires on the average American. And I think Alex, I know you and I were chatting earlier this week about just this is just so interesting with this tariff war, because I got to share some personal insights from here in Las Vegas. So earlier this week they had the International Sign Exposition. So this was very interesting. This is actually, so everything in signage. So you think about all of the signs on the side of the road. If you have a sign for a business, if you have these huge printouts. So again, Las Vegas is home to all of these conventions. And just to kind of give people that reference, every year, every January, I go to the Consumer Electronics Show, and you had said that I think the Canton Fair had between 60 to 70,000 booths or something, like exhibitors there. Is that right, Alex? So, in context, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is probably one of the biggest shows in America, has around 4,000 exhibitors there. So, I mean, it's less than 10%, of what this Canton Fair would hold. So, I mean, CES is impressive when you go there, but just again, the scale. And I think that's what people just don't realize. This is, imagine 10 CES conventions going on at the same time. That's what the Canton Fair represents. And I think what I'm really starting to see now is, so I went to the International Sign Expo because I met a mutual friend of both of ours, but full credit to you, Alex. You introduced me to Tony from LC Signs. I don't know, let's get some, if you know Tony from LC Signs, he's noted as probably one of the most viral guys in China, has an amazing Instagram and TikTok account where he makes very, very funny videos. But, he's making these viral videos of him making signs in his factory in Guangzhou. And, so I got a full interview with Tony that we're going to bring to the YouTube channel. But, what's so interesting, Alex, is he said, my biggest question to him was this. I just said, who's your number one customer? And he said, oh, by far, it's the United States. He's like, most of my customers come from the United States, and that's why we're here, right? I have a booth set up at the International Sign Expo. It was a beautiful booth, had all of his signs that he makes. And he said, their business has been doing really well in Guangzhou. Started off as a single factory, and then it doubled and then doubled again. So, they've basically quadrupled the amount in size, in a few years, obviously due to his social media success, obviously driving a lot of customers. But he said, what his thing, and I think this is what a lot of people don't understand. He said, Cyrus, when we started, we had one guy that did quality control, but we have become so obsessed with the quality. Now we have 8 full-time quality controllers. And, so that one position, we've now increased by 800%. We want to make sure that every sign is made in the best possible way for the best price point. And again, I wanted to really drive this point home, Alex. And I said, Tony, how worried are you about these tariffs and about the U.S. consumer? And I think what's really interesting, he said, he's like, yeah, when tariffs come out, Liberation Day comes out, everyone's kind of left scrambling a little bit. You just kind of worry. But then here we are, where we are a month later, and things are starting to settle down. And he just felt he wasn't worried about it, right? He just kind of felt like, this too shall pass. It's going to be a little bit chaotic, but at the end of the day, he has an amazing company. He does amazing signage. And this is a point that I wanted to bring up. I was looking at his booth and his price points. And interesting enough, I was, going around the show, looking at whatever else there is. And I found an American competitor to Tony from LC Signs. Interesting enough, they came up to me. They said, they saw that I had a camera, and they said, what are you doing with the camera? What's going on? Let's bring back Carl into the stage. And they said, yeah, we actually have our own factory here in Orlando, Florida. I said, wow, Orlando, that's my hometown. And I was chatting with them, and their price points were basically 3 times that of Tony from LC Signs. So, this is an interesting point that I think really needs to be driven home, is that everybody wants to buy made in America until it's actually time to make the purchase. That's the truth of what happens in America. And I actually have this amazing there's an amazing thread on Twitter that actually it was a retailer that said, "Hey, I actually make shower faucets, and we actually manufacture these in China. We do a tremendous amount of business. We sell most of it through our website. The price point is $39.99. But just to test this out, to kind of do an A/B test, we went ahead and we found an American manufacturer. So we found proudly made in America, American steel. We got this exact same shower head built in America, but of course it's 3 times the cost. And so as a result, we have 2 versions now on the website. We've got the Chinese made one that has been kind of our bread and butter that sells for $39.99, or you can buy the USA one for $129.99. So it's literally $90 more. And so,
Wow.
again, it's an amazing one because he said, what we did is we did a test. So this weekend we launched a promotion. We already have, tens and thousands of customers on our website already. But we said, hey, we're going to run a promotion. You have 2 options for this sale this weekend. We're going to do the China, you can do this one or the Made in America one. And he said 3,700 purchases this weekend from that promotion. Guys, take a guess how many bought the Made in America version out of 3,700 purchases. Double zeros.
Zero.
Double zeros.
Zero.
Zero. And that's the interesting thing. I mean, Carl, right, hit the nail right on the head. At the end of the day, I think all of us have some patriotism, right? We love being patriotic. Again, if there's an opportunity to buy Made in America, sure. So again, if you have the Chinese version of a faucet is $39, but the American version is $49, I guarantee you, out of the 3,700, you have some people like, $10 more, buy Made in America. Sure, why not? I can afford an extra $10 on a faucet. But if you're building a brand new house and you need what, 10 faucets, for everything, now you're going to spend what, another $100 each. I mean, that's an extra $1,000 out of your pocket just to buy Made in America. That's just not feasible. People aren't going to do it. And there's the data that supports that, right? 3,700 purchases, 3,700 purchases wanted the Made in China version because it's price at the end of the day. And I think that's the main thing that people just really don't understand in the West of how, how prices are going to skyrocket. And honestly, I think we're going to see some empty store shelves and some craziness unraveling here in the United States in the next couple of weeks and months. Carl, I want to get your thoughts on that. What is, how are you? I wanted to, because I know you're full time in Bali, Indonesia, and I want to know what you're thinking about this tariff war, kind of more on an international perspective. Like how are you looking at other countries around the world and what they're doing, specifically, and how they're viewing, because Donald Trump has famously said that he wants to use tariffs to make countries choose. I want them to choose between the U.S. or China. Give us your perspective, being in neither of those countries, but being in Southeast Asia, and, let me know what your thoughts are.
Well, most Southeast Asian nations, they don't want to choose. They're perfectly happy to be between China and United States and do business with both. In fact, many Southeast Asian nations that benefit from Chinese investment and being part of the Chinese supply chain, and they would like to continue to export to U.S.
Right.
China is not making them to choose. It's the United States is telling them it's either you, it's either us. It's either us or highway, right?
Right.
But most Southeast Asian nations, they want to be friends of all and enemy of none. And this really goes, it's quite shocking, actually. Even Singapore, which is one of the friendliest states to United States in Southeast Asia.
For sure.
Singapore minister have came out and criticized the Trump tariff as a source of instability, causing instability in the region. And I want to, you mentioned about a Twitter post. I actually saw a Twitter post by an American, Molson Hart, who is in the business of exporting educational toys from China to U.S. And
Okay.
he made a very interesting post. He said, right now, around April 10th, China to USA trade shut down. But people in United States just haven't felt the full impact yet, because it takes 30 days for the Trans-Pacific shipping route for the ships to arrive from China to Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach. So that means the real impact will be felt on May 10th, May and June. And right now we're seeing a sharp drop off in number of container ships leaving China for United States. And this will going to have ripple effects, because once the ship stops coming, that means that the truckers going to hit really hard in the West Coast. I mean, the West Coast truckers, they're going to be massive layoffs, come May and June. People, and it's another 50 days to go from China to New York. So people in New York probably won't feel the full impact until June. And by that time, it will be too late, because even if Trump are to reverse his policies today, it's going to take, and if the Chinese supplier just said, okay, well, let bygones be bygones, let's continue to do business, that means it will take that long to restart the factories, to get the goods flow again. There's going to be and let's assume perfect conditions, which means the tariff rollback, the trade flows again. That means there's going to be a huge pulse of that's going to hit the West Coast ports, especially Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And logistics is usually structured that way, as to smooth out kind of this trade flow. The ports are not designed to handle this kind of pulse traffic. This is going to cause huge delays, and it's going to cause huge shortages in U.S. I mean, if this thing is not rolled back immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's a fantastic tweet, and this is exactly what you're saying, Carl. It says, and it has started. Look at the sheer number of ships that are bound for California that are stuck in ports in China. So if you're looking at that map, the obviously the blue part is the ocean. The light blue dots are ships, and you can obviously see the huge concentration of ships that are currently in China. Again, these goods usually would get to the U.S. within 14 to 21 days. Now, at this point, like you had said, even if you reverse the tariffs tomorrow, right, everything go back to normal tomorrow, this has been a massive hit to the supply chain. And so you are going to see this, you are going to see this affected in the stores at Walmart, in Target. This is going to be affecting the bottom line of every American, right? Because obviously simple economics, supply and demand, if store shelves are empty and there's only so many products left, the prices are going to start going up, because people are all going to want that. And you can just see, the shortages, like you had said, Carl, it's inevitable at this point. You're looking at, even like clothing companies, right? I mean, they're working, seasons ahead, right? Like clothing companies are looking to manufacture stuff for spring 26 now. That's what they're working on. But all of a sudden, now you're seeing, so you're going to start seeing a bunch of shortages. Like you said, summer and fall are a total wash. Hopefully it doesn't last through Christmas, but I saw another report that said the toy industry specifically is going to get absolutely hammered. Christmas in America is going to be looking very different. I mean, unless they reverse the tariffs very, very quickly. But we're already going to start to see that effect, for December is happening because of policies that are passed in April, and again, that's just how integrated our supply chains are. Again, not many people are talking about this, but this is why, why we talked about this stream today. It's like the truth about the trade war that the media is not showing you. And I think this is so important that people start getting this information, because, Alex, you did a really good job of putting together those intro clips for our little monologue that we had to start off the show today. I know you're a finance guy, and talk about you found these amazing clips from Americans, talking about that they have,
Sure.
Like talk about the effect for the American business owner and how that works.
Well, a couple of things I want to
Please
just kind of add to this. I'm going to bring up a website here just so you guys can have a look. Let me just see which one is it. Sorry. Okay. So this is something I actually use for trading to get an idea of how the economy really is going. And this is your Port of Los Angeles. And these are real-time numbers. Okay. You can see April 27th to May 3rd from previous week down 28%. May 4th to May 10th, previous week down, and change from that. You see, that's where, Carl, the sweet weeks that we're talking about. Currently right now, everything was looking good up until May 3rd. And then bang, we start to see a 19.31% previous year down. And then, of course, down 22%. And what's interesting here is as we come back, the active empty containers on the terminal. Now, trust me, they don't want these containers to actually go faster into the ports right now. They actually want them to go slower into the U.S. ports, because once they hit the port of call, the tariffs get triggered, the custom agents start to clear these containers, and then the check has to be written. So some of these people that have been bought the stuff that's on the water, they wanted to just kind of sit out there for a while, kind of float around, take your time. Oh, we have a mechanical problem on the boat. No problem. Take your time coming into the ports. Now, that's one aspect. So the average business person that's doing that. Now, what's going to happen is some of these cargoes that are coming from, China, we're going to be switched. They're going to be switched to air freight. So you're going to see a boom in the airline industry when people or these tariffs actually go through. And let's say they decide, okay, we're going to cancel the tariffs. Well, then you're going to see a massive air freight coming from the United States, where goods that can be air freighted, they will be able to land in the United States within 72 hours instead of 30 to 40 days. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing a lot of, real heavy items. Toys are heavy to ship. They're big boxes. Clothing, most of that can be shipped by air freight. So you'll see the container market get absolutely obliterated. Look at stocks like Maersk and stuff like that. Going to be in for a rough ride. And then you'll see the DHL boys see a massive upturn if Trump bluffs on this coming up in June. Another point I wanted to point out is that these tariffs can be very easily avoided. One just has to understand how to use fulfillment companies. And there's nothing the United States can do. It's a cat and mouse game. If I was currently right now in a situation where I could air freight my product from China, no, I wouldn't air freight it from Shenzhen direct into, New York or anything like that. I would touch it down in a bondable warehouse in the United Kingdom. I would bring it in, and then I would re-export it back out. And then you will only be hit with UK tariffs because it's from the port of export to the port of import. And when China, they can easily we call it round tripping. So it's really making the average person. Yeah,
Alex, this is why Trump put tariff on the entire world, because they wanted to prevent transshipment. And by the way, this is back to an earlier question you asked, Cyrus, about the impact in Southeast Asia, because a lot of the Southeast Asia is disproportionately impacted, because a lot of there were a lot of Chinese investment coming to Southeast Asia precisely because they're trying to get around the quota, export quota to United States. A lot of Chinese textiles, for example, have moved to Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. And now they are getting hit with the tariffs. But it goes even beyond that. There's some details about the trade negotiation between Indonesia and United States that's being leaked out. One of the asks from the U.S. was they're not happy with the Indonesian QR code payment. Indonesia has their own mobile payment. They have their own mobile payment system. They have a national system for just using QR code to pay. This is like, by the way, this is pretty widespread now. Not just Indonesia, but Thailand have their own system. I was in Bangkok 3 weeks ago. In the Bangkok CPD district, they have these street vendors outside selling like lunch boxes to the office workers going to work, and they all have this little QR code you can scan. Before I only saw this in China, but apparently now this is quite widespread in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. But United States is coming and saying like, no, this is a non-tariff barrier. This your QR code payment system benefits local vendors. We want you to switch to MasterCard and Visa. Now, so this has nothing to do with bringing manufacturing job back to the United States, folks. This has everything. You do what we tell you. This is about capital domination. This is about domination by American Wall Street, by American capital, and this is why there's a lot of resistance in Southeast Asia. And then they have a lot of different asks too. For example, now they're saying what they really want to do is ask these countries to join United States in an anti-China trade bloc. To block out China. This is really hard ask for Southeast Asia because a lot of Southeast Asia infrastructure development, from power plants to railroads, depends on Chinese investment, and there's a lot of Chinese investment coming into Southeast Asia, opening factories, and United States is not offering any alternatives. They're not saying, okay, so forget about Chinese investment. I will give you shitloads of money. Take my investment to do. No. United States is not doing that. United States like you can't do trade with China, which even Japan has said we're not going to do that. And it's quite shocking to me because Japan is always the state that go along with whatever Washington says, but Japan has publicly said we will not go along with an anti-China trade bloc because that's not in our national interest. So if Japan does not go along with U.S. plans, I'm sorry, nobody will. Nobody will. If Japan actually said no to United States, that means forget about other countries.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I think there's no overstating how transformational that is. Japan has pivoted. I mean, they have made a complete 180. They've always been aligned very close to the United States, but now they're actually defending China against the United States. And I think, like you said, I mean, if I would have told you that a couple months ago, Carl, you would have been like, no chance, Cyrus. Like, there's no chance Japan would take that stance. But it's amazing, again, just what, the basic facts that people don't understand about this. I mean, we've got a guy in the chat right now that's laughing and he's like, hey, guess what? It's actually China, it's Xi Jinping that's been tariffed, guys. This guy's the one that's so desperate for a phone call. But again, it's just that's somebody that doesn't understand the basic fact. Xi Jinping hasn't been tariffed. It's the American consumers. Again, this is like Alex, that clips that you had brought up when you interview a business owner. How was, Liberation Day was April 2nd. How are you feeling? Well, I feel like I'm being liberated from my money, right? We had an order for $30,000, and guess what? It's now $230,000. Who's paying that? It's not Xi Jinping. It's not China. It's the American consumer. Well, it's the American importer, right? That's going to have to pay that. And
right.
If you right, and obviously that cost is going to get passed on to the.
Sorry to cut you off, Cyrus. But what's making the average business owner in the United States wake up here is, wait a minute, the government has this much control to ruin my company. I'm going to find an alternative. And that lady, there was a lady on there talking about her business, as you said, went from 30 to 265,000. Exactly what I said on this program 3 minutes ago. Now, people think that just because you ship from China and you can touch down in another country, clear through customs, repackage simply by putting a label on it, and then sending it back on. These warehouses, these fulfillment companies are booming everywhere. Just ask Singapore how many packages are going from China via Singapore to the United States by air freight or even cargo now. And these are routes. And that lady in that full interview, she actually went into detail. She said, yeah, we're thinking about, our next shipment coming out of China to go through Australia and then down. Yeah. There's nothing the United States can do about it. But what it's doing is it's waking up the average business holder and business owner in the United States saying, wait a minute, is this really where we want to be in business, where the government has a policy to ruin our lives because of, a policy that the administration wants to have right now? This is bad for business. This is bad for America. This is bad for everyone. And I hope, and what I'm seeing here, and we're seeing two gentlemen that are standing up to the current U.S. administration. One is Vladimir Putin, and one is Xi Jinping, and they are not deviating away. They are just going to say, you know what? Let's go down that line and let's see, maybe let's watch the store shelves get empty for a while. Why not?
Right.
Let's give it a ride. Let's see what happens. And he's not bluffing. This country is going to, if the U.S. doesn't want to get to the bargaining table and take down these tariffs immediately, like the Chinese government said, bare shelves are coming to you. Watch, it'll be a great movie. It will be really good.
Oh, it definitely will. And I want to bring up this. This is an interesting one because, guys, we're starting to see, massive companies, investment firms. And this is an interesting one. This is Citadel founder Ken Griffin extended his criticism of the Trump administration's trade policy, simply saying that tariffs won't bring back American manufacturing jobs the way the president anticipates, and that the country should play to its strength instead. I think this is a really good quote. Trump dreams of giving people their dignity back, and I have to applaud him for that dream, but the dream is not going to come true, right? So this is him giving a speech at Stanford University. These jobs are not coming back to America. And to be clear, with an unemployment rate of 4%, America has moved on. So, I mean, what's fascinating here, guys, is we're seeing Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan. I think she's JP Morgan. We've seen basically all of these investment companies. Ray Dalio's come out. I mean, everybody has come out and just absolutely, criticize these moves from the Trump administration. But I found this amazing skit from Dave Chappelle, the comedian, from 2017, and it was so great because he said, Donald Trump's ideas sound like high people's ideas. He's like, I want to go to China and I'm going to get the jobs. And he's like, for what? He's like, what? So my iPhone can cost $5,000? He's like, bro, I don't want to wear. He's like, I don't want to make Nikes. I want to wear them. Why are you bringing me these manufacturing jobs back? Americans simply don't want to do the work. It's definitely not going to, bring manufacturing jobs back, but it's certainly going to increase the price. It's certainly going to lead to these constraints on the supply chain, as we've outlined very clear. Carl bringing up those container shipments. Alex, great data there, looking at that website that's looking at the actual port. How many empty containers that we have. I mean, it's baffling. And I think I was talking to, do you guys know Louis Vincent Gabe from Hong Kong? He's with what is it, Gavicol Research. And so I did an interview with him earlier this week, and he had an interesting one. He said, the United States had really one shot in order to really kind of leverage against China. If, in theory, if the United States could have gotten together its allies and said, okay, all of us are going to work on basically, we're going to confront you as far as tariffs and currency manipulation and, basically, the rise of your exports. If let's imagine that, just for example, they went all in with the EU. If America grabbed Canada, grabbed the EU and said, look, we're a new group of 30 countries, we're going to come together and form an alliance against China. He's like, that might have had an opportunity, but Trump basically tariffed everybody in the world. So, that whole logic was just completely backwards, because now you've pissed off everybody in the world, but not only that, all your allies. I was in Toronto 3 weeks ago for business, and the sentiment in your home country, Alex, towards Americans right now is shocking. I mean, it is amazing how much Canadians have given up. And that's something we have never seen. We've never seen in history. And it actually has now hit the city that I live in Las Vegas. Everybody knows Las Vegas. We rely on tourism. Just yesterday, major news, MGM Resorts, which owns about half of the hotels on the Strip. They have now fired bellmen, valet parkers. Thousands of people have been laid off because of already the effects of a huge downturn in tourism. Basically, Canadians are boycotting America right now. They're not coming. I mean, this is the spring is a very active time for Canadians to come down. They're not here. There's no Canadians coming down to Vegas right now. And the Europeans, it has fallen off a cliff as far as European arrivals. And again, we're going to see this directly in the tourism industry in the United States because already we've seen kind of 30 to 40%. This is across the board in European countries around all throughout Europe. Almost all of them are now boycotting the United States, saying, well, we can't go to the United States for the next 4 years. And that's going to even be more accelerated because, as we know, the Europeans, they typically take their summer holiday. That's when they really start to travel. So it's going to only be magnified even more in the beginning. So, I guess my next question here, guys, is, has there been any win for Donald Trump with this tariff war? Like, I mean, can we cite any victory for him? Is there anything positive that we're taking away from this? Or is it really just, just a total loss for America at this stage?
I think he's already admitted that 60 countries are kissing his ass. So, I think there are some countries that actually have buckled and fallen for it. He's sitting there with a pair of twos and he's bluffing, and they fell for it. And they've already sent some of their representatives over. They're in the negotiations to sign these deals. Sucks to be them, unfortunately. But he's managed to, I guess, convince some nations to do it. Whether it's larger nations like China, I don't think the needle is not going to move here at all. Not at all.
Yeah, Carl, what's your
Alex?
thought?
But you know what? When Japan sent their trade negotiator to Washington, they asked the Trump administration what they want, and the Trump said, "What's your offer?"
Yeah.
And in the end, the Japanese trade delegate were so confused because they say, "We came to Washington to find out what you want us to do, and we came out having no idea. It seems like you guys don't have any ideas what you want to do either." And so they left without much reaching much of agreement. And this is I'm guessing this is happening across the board. And one of the for positive thing Trump did, well, for one thing, Trump has burnished China's image across the world. For the first time, you saw that even among Americans, the perception of China are turning more positive. I mean, this is thanks to Trump. Trump made China great again. I mean, like the internet meme in China is Trump is a nation builder. China. Yeah, nation being China. So Trump did that very well. I mean, Trump made Xi Jinping looks like a statesman. And I think you're right. You're onto something, Cyrus, when you said Trump did have one chance. But I think that one chance was in the first Trump term. If the first Trump term in 2018, if they had to pull the coalition against China, China would have been in trouble. But what happened in 2018 when Trump first started sanctioning China was that was a real shock, like a wake-up call for China. And ever since 2018 and ever since Biden has doubled down on sanctioning on China, China has been preparing for the last 7-8 years. For the last 7 years, China has been preparing for the eventuality that there could be a decoupling from the United States. So unlike the U.S., U.S. this whole tariff thing kind of like came out very quickly. It's like a brain fart. But China has been actually putting in the works for the last 7 years to prepare, to diversify, to decouple and de-risk from the United States. One result is today ASEAN, which is the Southeast Asian countries, is the number one trading partner of China rather than the United States. That happened in the last 7 years when China kind of tried to redirect its trade to the global South and the countries outside of North America, but particularly US. And this is why China are able to, Xi Jinping is able to sit pretty. This is reason rather than taking the call and call White House, Xi Jinping has traveled to the Southeast Asian countries. He was in Vietnam. He was in Malaysia, where he was like, they all roll out red carpet for him because now all the Southeast Asia, with the exception of the Philippines, they're pretty much standing behind China right now because they all understand the future lays with China. On top of that, there's somebody in the comment section asked, "Oh, is it true that the Shanghai CPD district was all abandoned?" Well, no, I was in Shanghai CPD district. It was hopping. Okay, it was hopping. I went to the Huawei store. It was full. Huawei. I walk in the Huawei store. One half of the store is they're selling, phones, laptop, TVs. The other half is they're selling cars, electric cars, like brands that you never heard in the United States, and you probably won't for a while. And they're very, very nice cars. They have like very nice Huawei software, and they are selling like to Chinese consumers at incredible prices. They have very premium feel to them, and they sell for like $25,000 and that's just like insane. I mean, like you would not get. Well, okay, you probably, that's probably only happening in China, because in China, because the intense competition, even Tesla, you can get a discount on Tesla in China. Like everything is just so much cheaper. And what I'm trying to say is, today China has a larger middle class than the entire population of the United States. I saw some report that estimates about 400 million people in China has joined the middle class, and China, it's reflected in, for example, in the auto market. China's car market is twice the size of U.S. market. So I no longer believe this report, this GDP estimation saying like the China is still smaller than the U.S. GDP. When the electricity generation is double of that United States, when the car sales is double that United States, I just don't think. I think even the PPP estimation that says China's economy is 1.5 larger than the United States, I think that's even like underestimation of the true size of Chinese economy right now. Shanghai just confirms my belief. China is really the future is still in China, and I think the future is in Asia. What Trump did was he walked in, he said, "You know what? F this Asian country. Let's start the Asian millennium." That's what happened.
Yeah. I mean, you're spot on. Oh, I think it's all right. Here we go. I'm going to just, Carl, you brought up an interesting point. I'm going to bring up the data, because you said, a lot more people are looking at China in a more positive light, and I mean, we have the data that really shows that directly. And I think this is something that, one of the things that that I always try to bring up is these international polls, and I really love bringing up these research points, because this is actually a very big deal, right? This is the first time in history that more people globally say China, 49%, will have a positive impact on the world than the US, 46%. Now, again, like to hammer home, Carl's point here, this is because of Trump, right? This is because of Trump. And again, you have two very interesting ways to go about. And like I asked you earlier, Carl, what are Southeast Asian countries, how are they feeling? What are they wanting to do? Your first point was, well, they don't really want to choose, right? I mean, in a perfect world, why wouldn't you want to do business with the U.S. and China, right? They're both two big superpowers, both have great exports, both have great products. Like, they're, if you're a smaller developing nation in, Southeast Asia, you're going to want to do business with both. So it's hard to be forced to be able to pick sides, but you kind of look at the chaos that has ensued with a Donald Trump, with his policies, and, all of a sudden, Vietnam and Thailand and, Cambodia just getting hammered with tariffs for no reason. It's like, what did we do wrong? Now all of a sudden we're the enemy, and now you want me to choose. So it's like, either choose to, be with the bully, or do you want to choose with a country that is, honestly going around the world, building things. Like you said, you go throughout Southeast Asia, so much of the infrastructure has been built by China. So it's very hard to kind of convince these people that, man, the U.S. is a better option. Where's the proof's in the pudding? Where's the proof? Where's the proof? Because what Trump is showing is that even if you're a loyal, friend to the United States, like Canada, it doesn't matter, right? Trump has threatened Canadian sovereignty, consistently calls them the 51st state. You look at Denmark, a NATO member, threatening to take over Greenland, which is part of their territory. I mean, this is not the actions of someone that is making peace in the world. It's also not actions of, someone that people are going to want to align with. So I fail to see really how this is helping America. I think, what's happening is, we had a question here from a super chat. Somebody had asked, when, this is Francis, when do you think business will be back to normal? Well, I think for the United States, specifically in the tourism industry, I think that you're going to see it's not going to return until something happens with Trump. Unless he makes a huge pivot and really time kind of heals that wound, or until he gets out of office. I mean, what Trump has done, specifically in Canada, as you guys know, I used to live there for many years. Trump has united that nation, much, much closer than anything that could have happened in Canada. So that's, again, he's building nations around the world, guys. He's not only building nations like China. Canada has become a more united and unified, cohesive unit because of Donald Trump. And that's just something that we could have never imagined just a couple of months ago. Alex, tell us about a little bit more the future of China right now, what you're looking forward to. I know that you've got a lot of projects on the go. You're at the Canton Fair. You're at the Shanghai Auto Trade. What else are you kind of forecasting for the future in China? What's the next on your radar?
I want to see where this new energy vehicle market's going, and I really think that the investment that the country has put in here proves that it's going to be successful. I mean, the amount of charging stations across the country. I'm in the motor city of China. It is Chongqing. It's the motor city. Massive automotive industry here. BYD's here. Chang'an is here. Avatar is here. NIO is here. All the big names make auto. It's just that's the future. It's pushing forward. And we're not just seeing it in cars. We're seeing it in just about everything you can imagine. There's robotic lawnmowers now that I saw at the Canton Fair. There's robotic window cleaners. I mean, the future is AI here as well. Yeah, we are 10 years into the future here already. And I don't want to continue to boast on that, but I just wanted to add one more thing that a lot of people are missing in this equation here. You see, we talk about trade between, North America and, China, containers on the water arriving. One thing that we've really missed is the digital goods. And China is sitting back there waiting and saying, wait a minute, there are a lot of digital goods that are being used by Chinese in our countries, i.e. Apple, App Store, Microsoft, Windows systems, Microsoft Word, into the tune of billions of dollars the Chinese pay to use this software system. Very easily can be taxed. And another note that I want to just tell the audience why there's such a big attention on TikTok in the United States is it's not just because it's an app where people are dancing and doing cartwheels. This has overtaken Amazon. This has overtaken Instagram. This has overtaken Facebook in shoptainment. The number one seller of goods in the United States online at the tune of $40 million a day is TikTok.
Right.
And it is number one. And that's why America is after that, not because it's thinking that it's indoctrinating American kids. But no, it's a major threat to just about every, we'll say, high street shop in North America and even Amazon. And it's a major threat. So we are seeing this nationalism happen, and where, the commander-in-chief has to try to protect his country. But, tariffing the entire world is not going to work, Don. So you're going to have to find a new trick, because that one's not going to work.
Well,
no, go ahead, Carl.
Alex, you need to tell your buddies in the Chongqing automotive industry to bring some of those cars to Indonesia, man. Because I'm dying out here. I'm dying. Like I'm actually getting a electric car because I need to send my kids to school, and I'm getting a Wuling. Now it's a Chinese brand, but it's actually partially owned by GM. GM owns 34% of Wuling. So this is actually a Sino-American joint venture. And GM's best-selling car in China was actually the Wuling Mini EV.
Love it. Love the car.
Little small
$5
car.
grand.
And you can't beat the price. Well, I was, but the thing is, it's
tariff at 500%. It's still coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Those cars outside of China, like the price goes a lot higher. Like I'm trying to, I look at the Mini EV. I'm like, okay, for that price, I actually can move the next model better. I get the Wuling Binguo, but even that, I'm paying double the price they pay in China. China, the top line Wuling Binguo is like $12,000. Here, I'm paying like $26,000 before the discount, but still, like, please get more Chinese EVs in Indonesia. We need that. But like the fact that when I mentioned that GM owns 34% of Wuling, people are saying, why didn't GM manufacture that, like bring that to US? The thing is, you can only manufacture that in China for that price. If you want to make something at that price, it can only happen when you manufacture it in China. And I still have to remind people, the Trump tariff is not about bringing job back home. By the way, Tim Cook called the White House. That's why Trump has put an exemption on electronics from China. But what did Apple say? Apple said they're gonna shift enough production of iPhone to India to manufacture for the U.S. market. So the Americans are gonna get the made in India iPhones, while the rest of the world will get the regular made in China iPhones, right? So those iPhone jobs are not coming back to the United States. It's just gonna shift some of that production to India. And so this is not a bring manufacturing back to US at all.
Well, Carl, I like that you brought up that point, because that is the one thing for the MAGA crowd. They do point to a huge victory for Donald Trump is the fact that they have shifted, that Apple has announced that they will be manufacturing iPhones in India. And I love your point. It's like, okay, so instead of China, it's now shifted to India. How does that affect the American consumer? How does that benefit? It's not like those jobs are coming back. They're just going somewhere else. It's going to be interesting to see if Apple can actually pull it off, because, they have outsourced some manufacturing to India, but I was reading reports that it's been extremely difficult because it's the quality control. It's that, they're just not able to produce at the same level that their Chinese factories are able to produce. So it's going to be an interesting one. I mean, are they going to be able to successfully pivot that vast quantity of iPhones there? And I think it's funny with the MAGA crowd, they're pointing to them as this is the massive result of Trump. This is the art of the deal. This is why he's so brilliant. And, okay, great. So America's iPhones are going to be coming from India. Well, the entire rest of the world, which obviously Apple sells more iPhones around the world than they do domestically inside the United States, those are still going to be made in China, right? So it's almost, but here's another point, guys. I saw reports yesterday there was a Japanese car factory that is now shutting down in America and moving production outside of the U.S. as a result of this trade war. So it's kind of this thing where we look at I'm gonna use the Western media's favorite side, but at what cost, right? So Trump has been able to pivot iPhones being manufactured from China, India, but at what cost? What cost does that come at? It comes at a huge cost, because other countries and other factories are moving out of the United States. So again, Carl, you put up a good point. It's not like they're bringing them back to America. They're just shifting over to India. That doesn't really result in anything better for Americans. But at the same standpoint, now we've lost factories inside America. So it's a net loss. And that's where I think when we're looking at this tariff, the revenue that was anticipated from tariffs, it's come in significantly lower. So again, you're looking at but at what cost? Americans are giving up billions in revenue, and they're going to be seeing these supply chains crushed. And what for? A revenue of $500 million a day. I mean, you were giving up billions to make hundreds of millions. It doesn't make sense. The math doesn't make sense at all. It's a net loss. But we are talking about Trump, who has run quite a few businesses into bankruptcy. So it's not his forte, if we're going to be honest about running a solid company there. So guys, we've had an amazing stream. I want to just kind of wrap this up, and I want to just kind of get your final thoughts on this. So, what are we looking forward in the future with this tariff war? Carl, what are you thinking as far as Trump? Is he going to have to just completely walk this back? Are we going to see the United States kind of settle at, I don't know, something like just a 10% tariff, or, kind of a blanket tariff? Let's just do 10% for the world. Something that's just going to be somewhat reasonable, but something that Trump can kind of spin into a win. What are you looking for in the future there?
Well, I think what happened was the Trump administration severely miscalculated what China's response will be. Because they are getting the wrong information about China. They're getting their information about China from the likes of Gordon Chan, who's telling them that China is collapsing anytime. They're going to have to bend the knee because they need our money. And whereas China was actually preparing for this moment for the last 7 years. So this is why they're getting caught with their pants down right now. And my guess is Trump will have to capitulate at some point, because like by May 10th, shit is gonna hit the fan when when people realize goods are not coming to the U.S. shores. So and also midterm election is coming up. This is going to be, if you look at polls after polls on what Americans really concerned about, economy. It's still the economy, baby. And this tariff is not good for the economy. So my guess, Trump is going to have to walk back, but he will claim it's a victory. And a lot of the Trump supporter will buy the spin anyway. So there's really no net loss, right? I mean, they just claim victory and walk away. And then we can sort out this mess later. This is my kind of hopeful take on the future, but with a caveat, this is probably where over long term, I'm very unfortunate that we're probably looking at some kind of decoupling of the U.S.-China economy, just because now the business and suppliers are going to trying to factor a risk. Like anytime you get a nut job in the White House, the policy can go haywire. So business hate uncertainty, and I think there's going to be some level of decoupling. Unfortunately, that's just going to be the way it is. And whether how effective U.S. can bring the manufacturing back home, this is a $1 trillion question. This is a real long-term project, but I don't have faith in this administration or even the next administration to put in the hard work to really commit to the investment into public education, infrastructure, all those things that China has been doing for the last 40 years to build up the supply chains they have. So this is my concluding thoughts.
And I think you brought up a good point here, Carl, is, a lot of people are saying we're going to bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S. Well, here's the difficult thing with that. If you want to build a factory in America, right, it's going to take you a minimum of 2 years, right? It's very heavily regulated, right? In order to get, your quality control permits, the licensing, all the, the permitting, building the actual facility, having it inspected, certainly, for example, when I was in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, I went to a baby formula factory. So, just the regulations in order to make that, it is so difficult to go through. It took them years in order to get all of the approvals, because it's you're dealing with baby formula. It has to be very, very heavily regulated. It's got, the quality control, the cleanliness. It's through the roof because it's so sensitive. So, this is not something that you're going to build within a year or even 2 years. And so I think what the issue here is, you're looking at, okay, let's just imagine, that the three of us are business partners, and, we have, $1 million brand, we're manufacturing in China, but now we're asked with the question, should we build a factory in America, to get around these tariffs? So the three of us start looking at this and we're thinking, okay, it's going to take us 2 years to build a factory in America. It's then going to take us another 2 years to somewhat maybe break even, or, even look to be profitable at what we're doing. And then, actually probably a lot longer than that. But, you're kind of looking at almost a long-term plan. This is probably going to be more like a 6 to 10 year, investment that's going to, it's going to take us a long time to really, scale up that production. But then what you said, Carl, is so true. what happens when Trump is gone? There's a huge risk there, because it's like, why would we take on that risk? Why would we invest millions of dollars of our own money to, replicate a factory in America, knowing that the policies of the administration could change immediately, right? What if the midterm elections happen? I mean, I think that you're going to see a huge blue wave sweep in on the midterms because, quite frankly, even many, hardcore Republican Trump supporters, I think they're starting to pivot. We're seeing them pivot. We're seeing them, we're seeing voters come out and regret voting for Trump. This is what we're seeing right now in the United States. You obviously have your hardcore MAGA crowd that, they've drinking the Kool-Aid. Trump can do no wrong. This guy is the king, and, we're worshiping our king. But, many people are starting to regret that. And I, like you said, at the end of the day, it's the economy. That's what Americans are concerned about. If they can't go to Walmart and, buy the basic necessities, that's a massive problem for the United States. And, I had sent a chat in our group chat. I sent a graphic that had said, this is amazing. I mean, CNBC, brand new report, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now. America is not in a strong position. The vast majority of Americans, right? You have this huge wealth divide, right? Obviously your top, 1-2%, they're uber wealthy, but 60% living paycheck to paycheck. How about, Carl, I saw you sent out that tweet. It was something about like more Americans are, buying groceries on a buy now, pay later payment scheme. I mean, that's just baffling, to think about buying daily necessities. You can't afford that. We're going to have to basically put that on a credit and pay interest on that, and hopefully pay off our grocery bill later on. I mean, this is really going to hit American consumers really hard. And again, I think it goes to the planning of China's government that can move forward in a direction. And my big point here would be, like you said, Carl, the 2018, that was really the start of this trade war. This trade war didn't start on April 2nd, Liberation Day. It started right in the beginning in 2018 when Trump said, we are going to restrict China from buying our technology. It is our goal to limit China's growth, and we really are going to hit China hard. That forced China to pivot, right? China was happy to be the number one customer. They would have continued buying Intel chips. They would have bought, anything that the U.S. made. We'll just be your number one customer. Why do we need to invent it or replicate it? We'll just buy it, and we'll buy a lot of it from you guys, and we'll just do business. But that obviously forced the pivot. And like you said, for the last 7 years, China has become very self-sufficient in almost anything. Exactly like Alex pointed out with his EVs. Alex, let's get your thoughts. What are you looking from your perspective? I know you're a market guy, and
I just got to echo Carl. Exactly what he said. That's what's going to happen. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Nice and short. So, guys, I got a couple super chats. Trevor Norman, you've been a big supporter of the channel for many years now. Always joining our live streams. I know that you support us all here. And CYB Excellent says, excellent stream, guys. Many thanks. Guys, appreciate the super chats coming in, and people spending a little Sunday afternoon with us, here talking about the future of our world. Guys, closing thoughts. Anything else you want to add before we sign off and say thank you to everybody? Carl?
All good.
Well, now we are living in the Asian millennium now, guys. Trump made it happen. Thank you, Trump.
Absolutely. Hey, Trump, Jianguo. He's building that country. He's got to build that country. Trump's building around. Well, gentlemen, I think I'm excited. So I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to be coming back to China around June 15th. I'm coming with my wife and 3 children. We're going to spend the summer in China. We're going to be based in Guangzhou. So, Alex, I know you and I are going to meet up at some point, whether that's in Guangzhou or Shanghai or Chongqing or maybe somewhere new. But Carl, if you're in China during those months as well,
Wait, this year? Which month?
June. I'm coming in like
June.
6 weeks.
Oh, June is too hot. I don't know.
It is. It is hot. We're going with the school schedule, right? The kids are out of school, so we're kind of limited by that. But we're looking forward to it because we're going to bring the YouTube channel back to China. We're going to be, making a lot more videos on the ground. And Alex, what I really loved was your insights into the auto industry, because I think like Carl's living proof, right? He's like, I want these Chinese EVs, like even if you said I could buy them in China, it would be 12K, but now they're what, 26K before discounts. I mean, it's still a great price point for you. I mean, you're still going to buy it. And I think that you're going to, Alex, you're predicting that we're going to see more, more of these cars coming into the U.S. at some point, right? It's just inevitable. American consumers are going to want it.
There's no stopping it. It's coming. Prepare everybody.
I can't wait to see that first BYD just rolling down the highway here, in America. It's gonna be awesome. Well, all right, guys, we're gonna end it there. I want to say thank you to everybody for staying here in the chat. We had that, I think, at one point well over 5,000 people amongst our channels, together. So I think that's an incredible show, and I just want to say thank you all for your amazing support. And we're gonna do this again, guys. Let's run it back. I think next week we're gonna try to bring in. Patrick Lancaster, going to get another little angle here with obviously bringing up a story that we've covered extensively here on YouTube. Is obviously another kind of thing that, Trump had said, I'm going to end the war on January 20th between Russia and Ukraine. Everything's going to be done. Just look at me. I'm the man. And, it was interesting, not very rare for Trump, but he did mention that it was a lot harder than he thought it was going to be. So I think that's a very bold statement from Trump for him to actually admit something like that. So we're going to bring in Patrick, kind of get the latest on that. I know Patrick, he was just on Tucker Carlson, made a whole show about that. So Alex, let's Alex and Carl, let's line that up. Let's run this back next week and kind of keep giving the people what we want. But gentlemen, thank you for your time, and thanks for everybody spending time with us here today on YouTube.
Thanks, guys.
All right, you got it. We will send off with that, and let's end it with a little one of these nice music videos that we have here. Show ending. All right, boom.